Milo, is that you?
There, I think I got it. Bruce?
Lionel?
Bruce?
Lionel?
It's that time again.
No. Is it that time again?
It's howdy doody time.
Pancakes and bacon?
Yeah, pancakes and bacon. That would actually be pretty good.
It would be pretty good with some good dose of maple syrup on her.
Okay, well, let me ask you a practical question. This is a practical question. You go into your local Denny's, you go into your local Perkins, you go into your local favorite local. In my case, it's the Maple Leaf Restaurant in Aurelia. And you get the Hungry Man breakfast, which comes with pancakes.
Yes, right.
How many pancakes do you need if you're having 2 eggs and bacon?
I would guess 3 or 4.
Wow. See, I'd be happy with 2. Two medium-sized pancakes would do me good with eggs and bacon. How many eggs are we talking?
Well, usually I would see when I go to my favorite purveyor of breakfast. I get the platters. It's got like 3 eggs. It's got home fries and it's got some sausage bacon and back bacon with it.
Yeah. And I like pancakes. So, I like pancakes with my breakfast. Do you sunny side up?
Yeah. A lot of times I do. Sometimes I go over easy.
Yeah, it's pretty much my go-to is over easy. Always over easy.
Yeah, because it's hard to screw that up.
Actually, it's really easy to screw that up because that's the way I try to make them at home. And I have trouble. I have trouble getting the spatula under the egg. Right. Under the egg to over easy it.
Yours is kind of an over. Oh, geez. Oh.
So you know what I do?
I guess we're having scrambled. No.
Yeah. No. You know what I do if I bust the yolk in the frying pan? I throw bacon into it right away and cook the bacon right into the egg, and that's actually pretty good.
Go. Exactly. It's not bad.
Yeah.
Egg coated bacon, not too bad either.
Grab yourself an English muffin, toast that puppy up, throw the egg and the bacon in there.
Oh yes, sir.
You are good to go. That mistake has turned into a masterpiece.
Oh boy. So why are we here?
You know how every year we for now, geez, I think we're going on about 32 years maybe since the late 50s. Anyway.
If you tell me what it's all about, I can verify your.
We've been doing the State of the Hobby.
Ah, yes, the great State of the Hobby
at the end of every year.
The poor hobby that's dying and.
Yeah, that's right. The hobby that's dying, and everybody's 103 years old.
Yes. And this has been going on since about 1937.
Yeah, exactly. So, for the last few years, we've had Joe Fugate of Model Railroad Hobbyist, a wonderful man and a great guest, and I hope to have him on.
Indeed.
I hope to have him on again shortly. I've been in constant contact with him, but I thought for this year to get the State of the Hobby, the Union of the State of the Hobby address, we would go to another fellow that we have high regard for that is also in the magazine industry, only he's in the paper magazine industry. He's the newly appointed editor of Model Railroad Craftsman, which is actually, it was started before Model Railroader, was it not, technically?
Are we talking about Railroad Model Craftsman?
Yeah, what did I call it?
Model Railroad Craftsman.
Yeah, well, I got the 3 words in there.
Yes, whatever. Close. He was close, but no cigar.
But are the initials RMC?
Yes, they are.
And it's published by White River Productions, which is also the publisher of one of our favorite magazines and one of our favorite magazine editors, none other than Tony, the Info Man Cook, Tony Tycho Cook.
Right.
Yeah. And he's also
he's editor of Model Railroad News and co-editor of HO Collector.
Exactly. Beautiful magazines come out of White River Productions. So
they do. They are quality.
I thought it would be interesting to talk to Otto and get his take on the State of the Union of the hobby.
Well, certainly. That's great.
All right. Would you like to? You know what? Why don't we just yell and see if he comes out of the?
Yeah, just give a hoot and a holler and let's see where it happens.
Hey, Otto, come on in out of the green room. Bring some shrimp with you.
All right, hold on. I dropped some shrimp on the way into the room here, so the janitor out there in the hallway.
Just kick it under the couch.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, well, there's some cocktail sauce too. It's kind of messy. It's kind of my. Yeah, sorry about that. But hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Little interesting fact about the shrimp that I learned just a few weeks ago. I thought the green shrimp were mint flavored, but apparently they're just bad.
Oh. Good to know.
Yeah. All right, Otto. So I don't know if you could hear us. You probably couldn't because it's a hermetically sealed room, the green room. And the reason we have you here is because we would like to, every year at the end of the year, we do a podcast called The State of the Hobby. And it's the State of the Hobby addressed by somebody who's important in the hobby, somebody who's a mover and shaker, somebody who's steering the hobby in the direction towards what they think is success. And because you've been the editor of Railroad Model Craftsman for almost a full year now, we thought you would be the ideal candidate because I've heard a story about you that is really, really cool. And that was one of the things I wanted you to relay to us was that cool story.
Oh, dang. With a build-up like that, I hope I can live up to it.
Me too. Otherwise, I'm going to be really, really disappointed.
and so will thousands of listeners.
Yes.
Thousands.
So what's it like? How long have you been the editor now?
Well, so I was named editor in February. My first issue was May, and it's been I guess 8 months of publishing and almost 12 months of panicking.
8 months of publishing, 12 months of panicking. And so are you pretty happy with the whole event, or?
I am. I'm really, I'm still really happy doing this. Really glad that I could have this opportunity, and I'm really fortunate to have really good people working with me. Our whole staff, we work really hard each month. There's myself, there's associate editor Harry K. Wong, he's on the West Coast, and also my graphic designer Todd Gillette. Between the three of us, like I said, we work really hard each month. We want to put out a consistent quality product and keep people reading,
Yeah. So, and what is okay. So the story I heard, and I think you wrote it as an editorial, and correct me if I'm wrong, which is often the case. You you were rail fanning, and there were some other younger people there, and somehow it came out that you were the editor of Railroad Model Craftsman, and they wanted to know if you had a YouTube channel.
Yeah, so I wrote about a quick trip I took home at the end of September, and I took a trip out to Long Island. Mostly I was just killing time, going around the city, and I took a quick train ride from Penn Station, New York, out on the Long Island Railroad, out to Mineola. Mineola is a junction between the main line and the Oyster Bay branch, so there's a lot of action. And there's an old interlocking tower that's most likely going to get tore down because the Long Island Railroad is so busy, they're going to add a third track, and that tower is in the way of the third track, and so it's going to go away. So I want to go out there and get pictures. So it's a Friday rush hour evening, nice warm day in September, and I go out there, and there's like literally a gaggle of kids at the end of the platform, and they're all preteen, and they're wearing their favorite railroad shirts, their railroad hats. They got video cameras around their necks. They're taking videos with their cell phones. They have tripods. They got timetable in one hand. They are connected. They know what's going on. And one of their parents was nearby. And I just kind of stroll up, and I got my Canon Rebel around my neck with my 200 millimeter telephoto lens, and I just kind of joke. I'm like, hey, is there what's anything good coming? And they all kind of look at me. They're like, what do you want, old man? They're like, what are you doing here? Um, and they're just like, oh, I don't know, this freight train just went by, and And they're like, "Do you like trains?" And I'm like, "Yeah." I said, "Yeah, I like trains. Came out here to take some pictures." And they're like, "Oh, do you?" And they're like looking at me with like screwed up faces. They're like, "Do you have like a YouTube channel or something?" And I'm like, "No, even better than a YouTube channel." I said, "I work for a railroad magazine." And these kids were just like, "Ow," turned heel and went back to what they were doing. They didn't even ask me what magazine. They didn't, they could care less. But I chalked it up, like I wrote in my editorial. I chalked it up to the fact that they were 10, 11, 12, 13. And they obviously hadn't discovered that aspect of the hobby yet. And like I said in my editorial, their whole world of rail fanning to that point was they could go outside, take a picture, and instantly upload it somewhere and get a reaction. Whether they're putting it up on Facebook or taking a video and putting it on YouTube, or maybe they have a Flickr account, or maybe they're getting pictures, published to railpictures.net. Wherever they were publishing, they were getting instant feedback, and that was the extent of their hobby. Now, one of their dads was nearby, and I'm talking to him, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I used to publish in Railpage, and I used to know Jim Boyd, and the editor of Railfan, and all this stuff." And I felt bad because I was starting to have more in common with the dad than I was with these kids. But it was, I didn't take that as a sign that the hobby was dying, because if the hobby was dying, there'd be no rail fans, right? So, okay, here was like literally a gaggle of kids out rail fanning, and they knew rosters, they knew train symbols, they knew, they knew everything in their world to that point. So they definitely had an interest if they were going out there to take pictures, to share pictures, to get feedback. They wanted to they wanted to be involved. And being at that age, that's what they knew about being involved. The other thing I sort of touched on is that every group has gatekeepers, whether you know it or not. And gatekeepers are the ones that, they're the ones that let you in. They let you into the inner circle, right? And now I'm a gatekeeper. I'm the editor of Railroad Model Craftsman, and if you want to get published in this magazine, you gotta talk to me. And it's not that it's an exclusive club, but you do have to take the initiative to talk to me, see if your idea is something we can publish, and then we'll work together and we'll develop it. Not everyone gets to be published in a magazine, whether it's, Railroad Model Craftsman or any other publication out there, because number one, there's only so many pages you can fill up in a month. There's only so many issues published a year, and an editor has to balance each month, each issue, what's going to be inside, and put the right mix of stuff to keep people engaged. Um, so it has nothing to do with exclusivity in that you're not good enough. It literally has to do that print magazines are a finite quantity. There's only so much to go
Okay,
around each month.
let's say somebody is kind of interested in being published in your magazine. What would be the type of article you are looking for?
I think anything that speaks to the active modeler. I think that's always been our voice. We've always been the magazine for people who are building, researching, that kind of work. And I'm loath to say I'm looking for specific topics, because every day my email box is filled up. Hey, here, I have an idea to write about this. And I'm like, wow, I've never even thought about that, heard of that, don't know what that is. Sounds cool. How do we develop that? We just finished doing an article about butane, how to model the butane industry, which people might not even think about because they see a tank car go by, they automatically think it's full of oil or ethanol. But this guy put together a story, talked about what the industry is, how it fits into the whole petrochemical industry, how you can model it, what kind of cars are out there, and you don't need to model a giant refinery to model this industry. I thought that was brilliant because I never gave that aspect of the industry a second thought. So there was a reader coming to us with a very specific idea, something he was interested in. He developed the story into something that our readers could use. So really, I think the criteria are: is it something that RMC readers could use? Is it something that you're enthusiastic about, and it's something that you can discuss in a way that you can get other people interested as well?
I'm hearing a lot of people, friends of mine or acquaintances of mine that have made through the podcast that are very excited because you've reached out to them and said, "Hey, this would be a good idea," or "Hey, have you thought about writing this up in the magazine?" And you're making a lot of people pretty happy, let me tell you.
Well, thank you, and like I said, I appreciate that because we work very hard to reach as many people as we can, and it's not easy. It's not easy trying to come up with the right mix each month and trying to reach people. And there's still people that we're never going to reach. But getting back to the concept of gatekeepers, I had a few people write me after they read my editorial. They're like, "Oh, those kids will never contribute anything because they're just going to go on Facebook and put their pictures up."
Hmm.
I
Wow.
disagree, right? And I thought,
Oh, yeah.
I disagree because what those kids are doing and what the internet has done for all of us, it's cut out the gatekeeper. So you don't need permission to publish anymore. You can go on Facebook, you can put up a picture. You can go on Flickr or YouTube, post your videos and photos, whatever. You don't need anyone's permission. Um, you can start a blog. You can even start a podcast, although I hear it's very difficult. I don't think anyone else should start up any more podcasts.
Yeah, it's
No,
really hard. Really, it's really hard, and you got to have that magic voice. You got to have the Voicinator 2000, and you got to just have it. You got to have it, and which is why I'm not on video because I don't have that. I don't have it.
that might be a premium service line. Oh, you might want to consider charging for that, paying for people not to see you.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Now you see, now we're getting somewhere.
That is one of the options on Patreon. That,
Yeah.
For so much they don't get the legs picture.
Yeah, yes, exactly. It is true. I think it's unbelievably cool. So, how many of the kids were there?
There was 4 or 5 of them, and then even as I was leaving to get back to New York, a couple more, joined up with them too. So, and those kids were not much different than me because I grew up in Westchester, which is suburbs of New York City to the north, and I grew up with commuter trains in my town. There was a train coming to my town every half hour, whether I wanted or not. And those were the trains that I would ride when I would go visit my dad in the city, go visit his workshop. And so those frequent train rides, being within earshot, hearing the whistles, at night from my house, always being exposed to the railroad, I think that helped my growth in the hobby. And like those kids, when I was young, I didn't have other people to talk to who were interested in trains. And there was no internet, and I couldn't just search for trains and look for other people. I think I was 13 or 14 before I ever met another kid my age who was interested in trains, let alone other people. So, I think we're seeing the internet shape our lives more. I grew up with the internet. By the time I was in school, the internet was a thing, and I grew up with it. These kids who I met on the platform, they're born into it, so they already have smartphones, internet, access to all this information that I didn't have access to when I was 8 or 9 or 10. So, for as much as people are moaning that we're losing real life interactions, I think the internet is facilitating that more so than you think. It may not be the way it was when you and I were growing up, but the internet is still facilitating connections. And to Bruce's point, where I used to be a little coy about reaching out to people in public forums about content I wanted to publish, but now I'm just like, let me just go out there and just do it. So I'm just like, I'll just comment in a thread, be like, hey, this is awesome. Please email me if you want to publish. And it's kind of like casting the hook out there, seeing who's going to bite, because a lot of people I find are great modelers, and they're just so gun shy about taking the first step and publishing. They it's just not something that interests them. They're flattered, but you know, or they don't know how to start, or they're not sure what's the right way to go. But I say if I cast out my line, I say I'm probably successful more than half the time of getting a new person into the magazine, and I think that's what it's all about. When I'm out there, I feel like I'm in the trenches. I'm in a bunch of Facebook groups that I don't have a primary interest in, but I'm just trying to learn what's out there, um, and trying to look for new content. And that goes even when I'm working on Railfan and Railroad as well. I discover a lot of photographers simply by trolling Facebook, trolling Flickr, trolling Rail pictures, and just looking for content. Because oddly enough, a lot of people don't just pick up the phone and call me up or write me an email and send me stuff. I reach out to them and I'm like, hey, that looks like a really great piece. That looks like a really great photo. Can we get that in the magazine? And they're like, wait, who, what, me? I never thought about us publishing. You think this is good? Wow, that's great. So I think people are, if I had one message to the listeners at home, it's don't be modest and shoot me an email and let's get you published.
Well, you're making a lot of people. The fact that you're reaching out as much as you are is giving a lot of people. I can't think of another word. I mean, it is thrilling to be in the hobby and have an editor of one of the two major magazines that have been in the hobby forever to contact you. And I can think of Adam Pinellas and a couple other people where you've reached out to them and they're just so excited about being in the magazine that it's a neat approach. I mean, it's a
No,
fun thing.
I love doing that. Yeah, no, I love doing that. It's a great feeling because I remember when I was young and the first time someone said, "Oh, hey Otto, nice picture. Hey Otto, nice model. Good job." And you're doing this for so long on your own, and really, like everyone, I don't think it's about pride or being vain. It's like everyone wants a little validation that, hey, look at all this hard work you did. Great job. I think everyone wants that recognition. And I'm glad, it's not just about grabbing random people off the street. It's like, no, this is really great work. You're toiling away here in obscurity. Let's shine a light on you.
Yeah, I think I think it's great. I mean, I want to talk more about that, but I don't want to get off. Uh, I think personally, I think this hobby is going to explode. I just think it's going to explode. Everybody's heard me say it 5,000 times now. I think it's going to explode. The people in it are going to all be covered with model railroad goo because of exactly the scenario you talked about. These kids have found each other on the internet and they don't have to talk to each other at school if they don't want about trains. They can talk to each other on their phone or on their computer after school, and they're all connecting, which is going to make the hobby grow like crazy because like you say, I was the same way. Being a model railroader as a kid, there was no place to go. I was fortunate that my dad got interested in it, and he knew a guy. My dad worked at IBM, and he knew a guy that was in the IBM club, and Pat Enright, was very excited to bring me into the hobby, so I was lucky. But there were no other kids around. And now all these kids are getting to connect. I don't think we have any idea how the internet is going to affect the hobby.
Yeah, and to your point too, back in the day, you would have been going into a club of older guys that some of them may have not wanted you there. Good chance a lot of them didn't want you there. Others would welcome you in and do the thing. But these days, these kids, they don't need that. They have found each other. They can do whatever they want without having to interact with old curmudgeons.
And that's what I was talking about, gatekeepers. So think about joining, even just walking into a model railroad club for the first time. And, literally there's gatekeepers. There are people who are the officers of the club and they're like, who are you and what are you doing here, kid? Oh, sorry, we have a minimum age requirement. And, you're too young to appreciate all this stuff. And, let me go back to smoking my pipe and, whatever it is older people do. I don't know. But, you know, these kids are like, well, I don't need you. I'm just going to go meet up with my friends my age. And by meet up, I mean literally online. We're going to have a group chat, or we're going to FaceTime each other, or we're going to do whatever it is. We don't need you and your club in the smelly church basement downtown, And that's the dangerous thing. It's that people will counter their argument to me. They'll be like, well, there's rules for a reason. We don't want anyone just coming in off the street. We have our huge model railroad down here. We worked very hard on it. We don't want someone just coming in here and wrecking the joint. Of course. You don't want someone just picking up a throttle and crashing the trains around. Of course. You want to keep those type of rules in place. It's really hard to break out of your shell in a sense that you have an organization, you're all older folks, you don't know if you can trust a younger person coming in. You don't know anything about their interests and their likes. And that can be really hard to adapt. Like, dang, we want new members. We don't know how to welcome new members for whatever reason. So that's really more of an institutional thing. I'm not going to sit here and say that all clubs are bad, because all clubs are not bad. Many clubs are thriving because they're able to welcome members. And we're not just talking about bringing in little kids. It's welcoming members from all walks of life. And those are the groups that thrive because they're able to bring people in, show them the way, and kind of break down those barriers. It's the ones that are unable to do that and grow. Those are the organizations you're going to see that are struggling.
Oh, for sure.
I'm going to throw out something here, which ties in nicely. There's often discussion, and I know a lot of people I've seen in person. Somebody new shows up at the local NMRA event and gets snubbed. But then that same person could go to the local RPM event and they're welcomed in. And it just seems that the RPM movement is thriving, whereas the old, shun the new guy, rightly or wrongly, I think it's getting better, but the reputation is out there that one group is more welcoming than the other.
I think it really depends. And, I've heard the same stories from different people in different organizations. And I think a lot of the same discussion applies where, people in the NMRA some people are very focused on their awards. And they're focused on the work that they're doing to achieve the different parts of their MMR or whatever they're working towards. And for them, that's really important. And I think sometimes it's really hard when, they see someone walking off the street and maybe they're thinking, oh, that person wants the same kind of recognition that I'm getting, and I've been working for 20 years and I've gotten these 3 achievements, and this person they're misunderstanding someone coming in off the street and wanting to learn for someone coming off the street and wanting to take their place. And again, that's really more of a personal issue. And I think we have to be careful that we don't, lump all organizations into the same group, because I really think a lot of what we're hearing about not being made feel welcome, or, it really comes down to a personal issue. The thing that I have to struggle with in my job, like I said, I'm one of the gatekeepers. In theory, I'm the one telling you, sorry, your work isn't quite good enough to feature in the magazine right now. But really, my job is to say, hey, this isn't up to snuff right now, but if you try a couple more things, or if you want to try to resubmit later, I'm sure we can find space for you. The idea is not to shun people and keep them locked out. If really this hobby is about sharing and teaching, that's really my job to let people know, hey, I'm sorry, your photos are a little too dark for publication. They're not going to print well. You might want to try doing this. Hey, your layout looks great, but before we can publish, you really probably want to paint your rails, tidy up your ballast, give them some tips they can really work on. And they'll either take that information and work on it, or they'll say, screw you, buddy, I don't need you. Either one is fine. I mean, at the end of the day, um, I'm not the arbiter saying that your modeling is good, great, or indifferent. I'm just saying that we have a collective standard that our readers expect. I don't set the standard. The readers of RMC tell me what they want, and I respond. I work for the readers. So this isn't Otto von Drake's rules of perfect model railroading. And in fact, I'm the first one to admit that my skills aren't always top notch and there's things I wish I could improve. In fact, there's a lot of things. If you saw the series I just wrapped up in the magazine about the project railroad we built based around commuter trains, I admittedly wrote in the text, I'm like, hey, I took a shortcut here because we're trying to publish, or hey, I'm not so great at doing this skill, but I still want to show you it anyway, just to tell the story. So I think people should realize that if they're in this hobby and if they're taking a photo and that photo brings them joy and I didn't publish it, that doesn't mean it was a bad photo. That just means I couldn't publish it for whatever reason. If that photo brings you joy, you're doing it right. If you built a model and you are proud of that model and you want to show it off and it's the greatest thing you ever did and I couldn't publish it in the magazine, that doesn't mean it's a bad model. If you're practicing the hobby and it's bringing you joy, you're doing it right.
Absolutely. If you're practicing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely. Not everybody, because a lot of what model railroading is artistic, and you may not have that level of achievement yet because to get in the magazine, you want the editor of RMC prefers that the modeling is not top notch, but very good. It looks like it's somebody's put a lot of effort into it. You need decent photography, and you need a decent setting, and you need to be able to. You don't have to be a writer per se, but you have to at least cobble together enough of your ideas to get it across so that somebody can edit it. So it's not that somebody's modeling isn't good enough. It's just perhaps they're not to that point yet. And like you say, you're the gatekeeper. That's a very good way of putting it. There's we have a gatekeeper here, but fortunately the bar is really low.
Well, and people talk about gatekeepers in society, and it's not always a good thing because, the gatekeepers are the ones that are preserving the old boys club, and so really gatekeepers, what you hear a lot of talk about these days are ways to, bust, sneak around the gate. For instance, someone who publishes a blog, they're publishing on a regular basis and they're following their own rules and their own standards, and they are publishing and sharing information, and maybe they get some fans and they are getting what they want out of it. They don't have to wait for me to approve their text, rewrite their text, critique their photos. They're just doing it. Same as someone, like I said, publishing on YouTube or publishing on Flickr. So you hear me talking about all this online publishing and you're like, well, what the heck do we have print magazines for if I can just publish right away without anyone's permission? Have you guys been on the internet lately?
No, I don't really use it at all.
Do they have that on computers now?
Yeah, they started putting it on computers, and there's a lot of garbage out there because there's no because there's no gatekeepers.
Gatekeeper, that's right.
So that is the hazard of self-curating, is what we call it, right? Let's say every night you give yourself a couple hours of internet time, and you're going to go check your favorite blogs, your favorite YouTube channel, whatever it is, listen to your favorite podcast on modellerslife.com. And, but in between that, maybe you're looking for something new and you're out there searching, I want to learn all about Canadian National Russell snowplows. And you start, doing some Google searches and you start finding some very good information and some very questionable information and then some outright garbage. And you could spend hours sifting through all of that. Or you trust an editor like myself to find the best material out there and put it into a format that you can easily access and send it to your doorstep every month. So that's where the value of print publications comes in. You are trusting the staff of Railroad Model Craftsman or whatever your favorite publication is to put together the best content they can find each month to keep you engaged and bring it to your doorstep each month. You don't have to sift through the garbage. We're sifting through it for you, and that's what you're paying for.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I think the other thing you're doing though, you're doing that. You're sorting through getting the wheat from the chaff, but you're also, if somebody has taken an interest and contact you and maybe it's not quite there, you're giving us some constructive criticism slash criticisms, constructive advice on do this, try this, and get back to me and we'll see what we can do. So you're not shooting them down in flames. You're giving them some encouragement, say, yeah, it's almost here. So try this, and then let me know what happens.
Right. And I think that's, like I said in my editorial, I think the only encouragement if you come across, someone new in the hobby and, their modeling isn't up to snuff, their photography's not up to snuff, don't shoot them down, don't put them down, don't make them feel unwelcome. You should say, "Hey, cool. Thanks for sharing. Keep going. Keep trying. Keep going. Don't stop. Don't, oh, you're terrible at this. You'll never be any good." No, just keep going. If you're enjoying yourself, keep going because one or two things are going to happen. If you're especially a young person in the hobby, you either burn out when you get to high school and you find other things to be interested in, or you're just a complete dork like myself who never gave up and someday you get to be editor of Railroad Model Craftsman.
Yeah, well, and
there's hope for dorks everywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, that's right.
Well, and the beauty of this, I don't know. We've interviewed probably individually. We've probably interviewed 125 people, maybe, and almost every single one of them has been a model railroader from the get go, from the ages of 2, 3, 4, 5, as soon as they got a train, and away they went. And there's a few that picked it up later in life, which is great, of course. But primarily, we've all been in the hobby forever. And now when you tell this story about these kids out there rail fanning, like to me, I think maybe in 20 years, when all these young people grow up, like so many people we talk to, like we've just been talking to Dave Abelese, which is going to be February of 2020 is going to be Dave Abelese month. Abelese. He says that Abelese, I say it's Abelese, so we're having a little bit of back and forth there. But it'll be Dave Abelese month. There's a 3-part, 37-part trilogy. He works for the New Jersey Transit. He's in charge of all the stations on the New.
Yeah, no, he's a pretty intense guy. I've been following his blog for years. He does great work.
I know, and there is so much information. I'm convinced that Al Gore invented the internet specifically for model railroaders. Like, don't you? All right, I'm interested. Like, give me your honest opinion. Do you not think this hobby's going to grow because of the internet?
Well, I think it's funny. We were talking on another topic, and someone was complaining about the proliferation of all the new models we have out now. I think I was at a train show once, and someone came up to me, and they're like, and it was a train show where two manufacturers were both releasing covered hopper models, and they were different. I had learned one was for grain and one was for something else. Like one was a cement hopper, one was a grain hopper, but outwardly, they both looked the same to me. But until someone pointed out the difference, I'm like, oh. And now that I knew the difference, now I wanted to own both models. And I'm talking to this guy, and he's complaining, and he's like, "Oh, did we really need two covered hoppers on the market right now?" And it's like, yeah, but I bet before today you didn't even know there were two types of covered hoppers. And I think that is what's great about the hobby is that because there's so much information being shared, and there's enough people saying this is important to me, and there's also enough people saying, I will support this with dollars if you make this. And the fact that manufacturing has been revolutionized with, just the computer age and being able to manufacture small batches. It used to be, when I was growing up, if you wanted a boxcar, well, Athearn made one 40-foot boxcar, and it came with a Youngstown door, and that was it, and that was the only boxcar you could get. So if your railroad used a Youngstown door, you were out of luck. But Athearn was able to make one tooling for a 40-foot boxcar and use that tooling and molds for, I don't know how many, 50, 60 years they got out of that mold.
Yeah.
And they ran off that boxcar in as many road names as they could, knowing that 9 times out of 10 it was close enough, and people would buy it. And then you'd read articles in the magazines. Hey, I'm going to take the Athearn 40-foot boxcar and detail it and rebuild it so it matches my specific railroad and its practices. So you did see a lot of that. But now people are willing to provide the information, do the research, and now we're seeing this proliferation of models that we just never had before. And the manufacturers are educating us. They're like, hey, your favorite diesel? Well, did you know that your particular railroad liked to put the horn over here, but everyone else put the horn up here? Oh, and by the way, we moved this hatch over 2 inches to the right because this railroad did it, but then this other railroad had no hatch at all. And you're just learning all this stuff. And sometimes it's a blessing and it's a curse, because I remember when I was a kid and I wanted a Conrail Jeep 38, I just went and bought me an Athearn Conrail Jeep 38, and I just said, good enough. This looks like a Conrail Jeep 38 to me. And then, you start digging a little deeper, and someone points out, hey, that horn's not quite right. Hey, that plow's not quite right. Oh, and then you start learning. And then when you start learning this, it makes you feel bad, right? You're like, oh no, I don't own a Conrail Jeep 38 at all. I own a model that's painted Conrail, and so it goes both ways. And there's some people that get really upset about that. I remember I came back from a trip once. I was visiting a hobby shop, and I saw some car I liked, and I really liked it, and I took it home and I brought it to the club, and I'm like, this car is so cool. It's my new favorite. And someone's like, that railroad never had that car, and that car doesn't even exist. And I'm like, talk about taking the wind out of my sails. I'm like, here I was enjoying my stupid little car that I got as a souvenir on a trip, and my friend comes along, and he was right. I wasn't mad at him for being right, but I'm like, in my blissful ignorance, I was happy. So I think the answer is, everyone makes choices in this hobby. They decide, they pick a favorite railroad, they pick a favorite era, they pick whatever. And some people are happy with even our hero Alan McKelland, right, with the Virginia and Ohio. He was a great practitioner of good enough modeling. He's like, hey, I have a gigantic railroad in my basement. If I want to finish it in this lifetime, I'm going to have to make some compromises. And he decided which compromises were going to, ones that weren't going to adversely affect the development of railroad. But if you look at early photos of the V&O, you will gasp, because you will see horn hook couplers on the equipment. So, and as soon as Alan was able to, he converted over to railroad to KDs. But when the railroad was first, being developed, getting it up and running was more important. So he left the horn hooks on his equipment. So I guess what I'm saying is, I think we're fortunate that we have all this information at our fingertips, and the fact that people are coming out of the woodwork, and the fact that we're able to have, even from 10 years ago, the models being released today, the level of detail is astounding. And I think while we're still seeing that stuff being developed, I think the manufacturers are also cognizant that there's still a level of modeler who don't want all that fine detail, who aren't concerned about horn position or the correct plow, but they still want to have quality models. So even if you don't have a model that's as finely detailed, it's still quality. And I think that's what we're seeing, is that we're still seeing an overall increase in quality across the board.
So how far do you think manufacturers can go with the detail? Because it seems to me every time we crest a threshold, it seems like and you're thinking they can't do any more to these models, and it seems like is there kind of like is this kind of like a I don't know, what do they call it when manufacturers get in kind of a competition to outdo the other one? That seems like what it's like now. Is all these manufacturers are trying to outdo each other, and it's like you're kind of wondering where's it going to end?
Working Sanders on your diesels.
Ooh.
That then we'll know we've reached peak model railroading.
Yeah. But then again, conversely, all these ones who are more and more detail, of course, that comes with that associated cost, which some people just abhor. And now they're happy. They'll go out and find, Accurail or something like that and buy some detail parts and do what they want to, rather
Sure.
than putting out.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's still. I don't think that's ever going to go away. But
And I think we've educated the people in this hobby, and it started back in the 80s, late 80s, right? When Lifelike launched Proto 2000 and Bachmann released the Spectrum line. Because really, if you think about it, up until that point, Lifelike and Bachmann were making, train set quality, stuff. And they said, no, we can do better. And, they went to their respective factories and they came out with more finely detailed products. And it took a while for us to get used to that because we were used to, and it's no knock on them, but I think at the time we were used to, in the 1980s, Lifelike and Bachmann being down market. And they're like, no, we don't want to be just down market anymore. We can do better. And we're going to show you how. And it was funny because it kind of made all the other manufacturers like sit up and take notice because they're like, whoa, this down market supplier all of a sudden is ramping up. Now we need to ramp up. And it kind of made everyone, look at their product lines and see how they can improve. And through the 90s, I think you saw better manufacturing processes because up until that point, you really only saw models being made for the most popular railroads or the major railroads. You weren't going to find obscure short lines. You weren't going to find obscure prototypes. But now we're able to see that. But I think there's always going to be a market for. People are always going to demand finer detail. There's a segment of the market saying like, what do you got? I'll take it. I'll put my money down. Just take my money. Give me all the detail that you can give me. I'll take it. And then there's some people who are middle of the road and they're like, I want an accurate model. I don't need all the fine details. I'm going to break off. And then there's another segment of the market that is perfectly happy with, I hate calling it down market stuff, but let's just say beginner or entry level. And they're just going to be just happy with that. Because actually, have you looked at some of the entry level stuff? The detail and decoration is just as good as a more expensive, high end model. And I think,
Exactly. At least one of the manufacturers out there is offering 3 specific lines at different levels of detail.
sure. So I think we're always going to see that, and I think that the manufacturers will keep responding. Again, going back to the hobby is dying myth, and people saying that they're being priced out of the hobby. No one is forcing you to buy a $300 locomotive, and buying a $300 locomotive does not admit you to the cool kids table. If you're able to, and that's in your hobby budget, and if that's what makes you happy, do it. But it's not required of you. And I'm certainly not discouraging you from supporting our friends who manufacture $300 locomotives. I'm just saying that's not the key for the gatekeeper. That's not going to make you instant model railroader. You're just going to be a guy with a $300 engine. And I think there's something to be said for the people who are putting that money down. They're not putting the money down to get in the cool kids club. They're putting the money down because they do understand the value of what they're buying, because of their experience in the hobby, because of whatever their preferences are, but mostly from their experience, and they know what they're buying. They equate the product to the value. And the people who are thumbing their nose, okay, the product has no value to them because either it doesn't match their experience, or it's just not something that, you know, they're going to get themselves any value out of. And that's okay. I don't think it's okay to thumb their nose and be like, oh, this is stupid. No one's buying these. Yes, people are clearly buying these models because they keep making more of them. So that's a silly argument, and you need to stop doing that because there's clearly a market for these high end models. But these high end models are not designed to shut you out from the hobby or stop you from enjoying it.
Exactly. Here's another thought that just popped in my head, and this I think is going to be a big revolution in the hobby. Is lately we've been seeing the prices of 3D printers coming down to where they're very affordable. How do you see the hobby taking off now that such technology is within the grasp of pretty much any model railroad?
I think I think 3D printing is definitely a very important part of this hobby, and it's been growing for the last 10 years or more as the consumer printers are becoming more available. There's always one thing I've cautioned against, though, especially with the consumer printers, and some of them are getting to be very, very good. They're consumer level and they're entry level for a reason. The printing is very coarse. So in the larger scales, like if you're, let's say you're making a shell for O scale, maybe S scale, or maybe even G scale, um, you're not going to notice the coarse resolution of the printing so much because of the larger scale of the model. When you start getting into smaller models like HO and N, you definitely are going to notice the coarse resolution. So, if your friend's like, hey, Bruce, I just got this printer, for $150. I can't wait to check it out. You know, you're going to get what you pay for in some respects. I think what a lot of people don't realize is that 3D printing, when it was first developed, it was actually known as rapid prototyping because it was intended for manufacturing companies to use to rapidly create a part without tooling up for it. So if a company had all their drawings for a part they were going to make, they could turn those drawings into a 3D model, load that into the printer, have it print in plastic or resin or any number of things, and then they could see right away, this part needs to be um, reduced by a couple of microns here. We need to put a curve here, whatever it was. They didn't have to tool up and make a bunch of mistakes. They could just prototype it first pretty quickly. And then that technology outgrew into like these 3D printers you can have on your desktop. So, a word of caution is that, a lot of these low level, entry level consumer grade printers are not going to give you the same high fidelity like you expect from a mass produced injection molded styrene model. Don't expect that. And if you have those expectations going in, if you temper your expectations, then the 3D printer can be a great tool.
Yeah, it sure can. I mean, have you done any articles about it in the magazine?
Nothing's come up yet specifically. I have had some people mention, tangentially in a project, oh, this part was 3D printed. Oh, I bought this part from Shapeways or whatever. No one's come out and specifically talked about how they're using a 3D printer in their modeling. Hint, hint, my email is otto@rrmodelcraftsman.com. If you have an idea for an article about how to use a 3D printer, I would love to hear it.
So let's say that a little bit slower, Otto, because not everybody can write down as fast as you speak.
Sorry, I'm from New York. I tend to speak very quickly when no one. Yeah, sorry about that.
That's the trouble with you young kids nowadays. Why, when I was a boy, I was a lot smaller.
You can reach me. The best way to reach me is through our magazine's website at rrmodelcraftsman.com, or look us up on Facebook. Type in Railroad Model Craftsman Magazine, and we pop right up. That's the easiest way to get a hold of me.
And you did say, but you said your email there earlier. So let's.
My email is Otto, OTTO, at rrmodelcraftsman.com.
All right. So, wow. So Railroad Model Craftsman has its own website. Wow.
Yeah, weird.
And you're in charge of all that, aren't you?
I am. I do all of our magazine websites, actually.
So, okay, so talking about the state of the hobby, how has that changed for you, and how do you see that carrying forward? I mean, we don't have to go into a long thing, but I mean, I'm interested. Like, I am. What do you think the hobby? Do you think the hobby's going to grow? I will ask manufacturers, and I will. The standard answer that you seem to get from a manufacturer is, well, I don't know if it's growing as it's maybe moving sideways. And I'm thinking to myself, well, you're sitting here with three brand new releases from the last year. Like, why
Right.
why are you continuing to build all these models if you think we're only going sideways? Like, I don't see that at all.
I think, and different manufacturers have different motivations. So I'm not going to second guess anyone's motivation for what models they're going to release at what time and what areas they go into. But if you think about um, what people are modeling, and we have a great variety of models now, you can easily model almost any era from, say, 1910 to present day with any number of off the shelf models available. And I think there's a lot of latitude there, and people are going to keep taking advantage of that. Um, Personally, my preferences in both railroading and model railroading, pretty much I'm after the standard era after World War One, pretty much, but usually the 1920s is where I start. Right around 1925, I consider to really be the start of modern railroading as we know it, and that's my personal preference. And when I was actually in high school, you'll find this interesting, Lionel. When I was in high school, I was modeling the 1950s. I was modeling the transition era because I was very interested in that steam to diesel transition, the mix, how those two technologies were living side by side. And me, a child growing up in the 1980s, never having seen a steam engine, um, but I was fascinated the more, and the lines that I was researching at the time, these New York Central branch lines, um, their heyday was in the 1950s, so I was kind of drawn to that, never having seen it firsthand, but that was one of my interests. As I started doing more research um, in my publishing, in my railfan publishing, I learned more about the 1960s, and I can never really wrap my head totally around the 1960s because there was too much change for me personally. It was like, steam was completely wiped out. All these mergers came in and wiped out the old railroads. So 1960s were a really hard time to wrap my head around. 1970s for me personally, it's like, well, the 1970s, a lot of railroads were dying. It was a really struggling time for the industry. In the East, you had the Rust Bowl. The trains were literally, everything was rusty and patched, and track didn't look good. Like it was a really bad time. And then 80s and 90s, you saw a real resurgence in the railroads. So it's kind of interesting. My modeling preferences, I almost have to say, are now in the 70s and 80s because that's when I was growing up. And even when I was growing up, I think a lot of people tend to model that era that they just missed. And so, late 70s, early 80s, I was a little too young to appreciate everything. But now I find a lot of my modeling efforts gravitates towards that. So I told you all that story, now, so you have model manufacturers making the gamut of everything from the latest diesels to a pretty good variety of early 20th century steam engines. So you have a pretty good range. I think that modelers looking for a challenge, you hear a lot more about people who are modeling not just the 1880s, but they're going back to like the 1850s or the 1860s, where there's not a lot of equipment um, available to the modeler. And there's not even a lot of research available because you didn't really see a lot about the railroads weren't documented until photography became a thing, and that wasn't until the 1860s. So really, you see a lot of people gravitate towards the Civil War era because it's so well photographed. But I think that's the next modeling frontier. People are going to abandon modeling anything from the 20th century, and they're going to go all the way back to the 19th century. And they're going to look for that challenge, not only the modeling challenge, but also the research challenge. What did it, if you're going to model a town from the 1850s, what did your town look like? What did the structures look like? What did vehicles look like? And vehicles being horse-drawn wagons. And what did horse-drawn wagons look like? There's a lot of research um, to be done. I think people find that to be a challenge. So I think you're going to see a lot of people gravitate towards 19th century modeling. You don't see too many people modeling the 18th century,
No,
mostly
that's
because
for
there weren't
sure.
any railroads. Yeah. I mean, you could model the 18th century. I think that would be a great modeling challenge. You could model a farmer's field, and your whole model railroad could be, well, in 100 years, a railroad's going to come right through this farmer's field.
Yeah,
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 it'd be
that's
more about putting BCC in a horse or something like that.
well, and
Oh,
that's one of the great things about the hobby is I don't agree with you at all. I don't see that becoming a modeling period of interest. But that's what's great about this hobby is it's not down to one particular time frame. It's whatever era works and whatever era interests you, and it goes like that. So you could be right. I personally, I think it's going to stay somewhere in the. It's like what you say. You're usually people are usually interested in the era they just missed. But I don't know. It's just so. Anyways, my original question though, and I'm not going to let you off the hook. With all of this internet stuff, and you have to do it. Like, what has changed in the last 5 years? Like, are you just like one of my favorite things that Tony Cook says to me is he couldn't have had model railroad news 25 years ago because people weren't releasing new products every other minute. Like he's just inundated with new products. It's not hard for him to fill up a 100-page magazine. So, like, what is?
well, and I think also what we're forgetting too is that it's not just the big manufacturers. I think everyone just thinks this hobby is run by 6 or 7 major companies. The majority of this industry is mom and pop, small cottage industries, literally on the dining room table. It's someone packing up Craftsman kits. It's someone 3D printing detail parts. It's someone sitting on their computer making decal artwork. That is the majority of the industry, and that is actually what's accounting for most of Tony's new product announcements.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of it is. It's not just the big manufacturers. It is. However, now all these people have the availability of the internet. Like in the last 5 years, it's become incredibly easy to make your own website. Like I have a website for A Modeler's Life, which is actually pretty good, and it's drag and drop. It's with a company, and I discovered it when I interviewed a fellow named Luke Towan, who's he's got a YouTube. Do you have a YouTube channel, Otto?
No, but I do work for a couple of magazines.
Okay. And okay, well, we're going to go back here and keep rail fanning then. That is so cool. That is so cool that happened. But Luke Towan has like 500,000 viewers, subscribers to his channel, and I discovered the site Weebly.com is what I use, and I can make a decent website that people can learn about the podcast. And I think that's changed in the last 5 years. So, like that's
And I think it's great that you bring up Luke Towan because I'm a huge fan of his work, his Boulder Creek Railroad YouTube channel. I mean, I'll spend hours watching his scenery tutorials, and he's actually turned his website into something that makes money for him. You probably see some of his newer videos where he has sponsorships or companies are giving him product to build a project around. And that's not I don't think that's a bad thing. That's, Luke's not going to take on a product that is garbage. You know, he's going to take on something that people can use. And I think that's great the way he integrates that. And I think it's great that he's able to monetize his website because that means he's free to make more videos for us to enjoy.
Oh, for sure, absolutely. I mean, I had a really good question. Oh yeah, have you heard about this? Is another thing because it's the state of the hobby. This actually came up to me. I was made aware of this yesterday, and I was talking to Tony Cook about it, and he had never heard of this. Have you ever seen Mike Armstrong's videos?
I'm not sure I have.
Well, exactly. This is a guy on YouTube that has about a 500,000 subscribers, and all he does is he makes videos of trains. There's no talking, there's no description, there's no narrative. It's just 20 minutes of trains, and it'll be like one of the ones he has is SEPTA, the SEPTA commuter service for Philadelphia, and it's absolutely great. It's all really high quality videos, and I just discovered that yesterday because one of our regular listeners, Tracy Boyd, was telling me that her grandson loves these videos. So I went and looked at them, and they're great. They're fascinating, and it's something that I've asked 3 people now, and they've never heard of them. And this guy has a 500,000 subscribers. I'm going to double check that.
Wow.
I'm going to double check that. Let me hang on. 493,000 subscribers.
Yeah.
That's almost a 500,000.
Coaster Fan 2105.
Coaster Fan 2105. And these videos are spectacular. And it's nothing but trains. And I can see how a small boy would be absolutely fascinated by these videos. And it's just like one train after another going by on the screen in very high quality video.
Sure. Well, and to speak to the traffic, like I just typed in Mike Armstrong into Google, and Google predicted the word trains after it, and then YouTube. So his channel is obviously very popular, and I've got this bookmark, and I'm going to check this out later.
So just to be clear, were you working the Google on the internet machine?
Yes, it's a series of tubes.
What does SEPTA stand for again? I know it's Philadelphia. What does it stand for?
Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority.
I knew that. I was just checking you. Just checking this. All right. So you're gonna have about 20 minutes left here. You got to give us your view on the state of the hobby. Like, is it healthy? Is it growing? Is it shrinking? Is the internet making it grow? Is it just a disaster? Or should we all start packing up our crap and go home? Start us out here. What is it? What is the state of the hobby for you?
So I believe in here in 2019, I believe that the hobby is healthy. I do believe the hobby is growing. And I do believe that maybe some of our attitudes and perceptions of the hobby are not healthy. And this goes back to a lot of things that we talked about, whether it's, are we good gatekeepers or bad gatekeepers? Are we excluding people intentionally or unintentionally? What are you doing individually to make the hobby grow? That's really the question. If it's you and your 6 friends, and it's always been you and your 6 friends, maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. I don't know, but it's not sustainable. And I think organizations have to take a hard look at what they're doing to not only attract but engage new members to come in. And the only direct experience I have is, I think I mentioned I'm the president of our railroad museum. I got elected this year for some reason. And I'm the president of the Rochester and Genesee Valley Railroad Museum. And it is no secret that the average age of our members is between 60 and 70.
This is
because when you're retired, you have a lot of spare time to spend on this kind of thing, not unlike model railroading. So my challenge, and myself being 42 and a half, my challenge is, how do I get young people to join this organization, to keep it going? Because I was a young person once, me and a bunch of my friends, we were all in our 20s, and we joined the museum, and we've worked all these years, and now we're the old guys, and we're struggling all the time. How do we make this organization attractive that a young person is going to want to contribute? Because it's not just about showing up, it's getting them to contribute. And it's not enough that the fact that we have trains. Hey, you like trains, I like trains, let's hang out. That's not enough. It's, how is this organization going to be engaging enough to have you stick around? And in the case of the Railroad Museum, I try to make people feel welcome. I try to point them in the right direction of how they can get involved. I show them simple things like, where we keep the soda, where we keep the soda and snacks for volunteers. Um,
Where do you keep the soda and snacks for volunteers?
well, that's if you come down on a Tuesday or Saturday, be happy to show you around, Lionel.
We,
We can't just let anyone know.
oh, okay. All right. All right. Seems fair. I guess I understand that.
Seems
But
fair.
Lionel, next time you come down to Rochester, I will give you the behind the scenes tour, and we will start at the snack cabinet.
all right. Now we're getting some. Diet
Okay,
Pepsi.
here's
Diet.
a question for you.
Hang on. Diet Pepsi.
We'll get some Diet Pepsi for you. I promise.
All right. Go for it, Bruce.
You were talking about trying to get younger people involved in the museum. If you looked at working with some high school technical programs where they could come in and if somebody who's interested in welding and stuff like that, they could work with somebody at the museum to practice and gain some welding skills or mechanical skills, that type of thing.
I would love to, but you probably I don't know, Bruce. I don't know if you've heard about America lately, but things aren't so
I've heard
good.
some rumors. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little different these days. No, like what's really sad is that classes that I loved, like wood shop and metal shop, and even things like home ec, yeah, those are all gone from American schools. And if you
Yeah.
want to get technical training, you actually have to sign up um, for a separate program in high school, and it's possible, but they don't make it accessible like they used to. And there's also still a stigma in this country where, oh, you work with your hands, oh, you're a welder, I guess you weren't smart enough to go to college. And it's like, that is complete and utter nonsense.
Oh,
Just
absolutely.
ask the welder who's pulling down a starting salary of 80 or 90, versus the guy who went to college who's already in debt. So but yeah, no, unfortunately, I wish we had more trades like that. But where we are finding young people in the trades, we are working with organizations like the local sheet metal workers union. They have an apprentice program. They're coming out to work on some projects with us. So we are engaging people that way. We regularly host Boy Scout troops for campouts. They come, they can earn some requirements towards the railroading merit badge. We have them do a service project. We give them a place to camp out. That's another way to bring people in. So, we do have some programs there. We do have a university a couple miles down the road, a big technical and engineering school. Occasionally we get some students interested from there. So there are a lot of different avenues, and I think that can be translated to model railroading. Maybe your model railroad club hosts a Boy Scout troop to come in. They can learn about trains, earn some requirements towards the railroading merit badge. Maybe you reach out to, local electricians union, see if they have an apprentice program. Maybe electricians want to help you rewire the club layout sometime. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here, but I think that's something we have to do. Is my point is look beyond your circle of 6 friends, look beyond the club room, and see if there's some sort of community engagement that will benefit both you and who you're trying to engage. For instance, when we have the sheet metal workers come out, we're not just using them as the hired help. We're doing everything we can to make them feel welcome, and we're also giving them projects that are practical in nature for them to use as training. And I think that's just the thing. I've had groups come. I was talking to a friend of mine. He runs an organization in Ohio. He's like, "Oh yeah, we had this Boy Scout troop come out, and it was a disaster." Well, what'd you do? Well, I don't know. We had them like sweep the floors. And we had them, carry some heavy stuff around, and then we had them do some other stuff that no one else wanted to do, and they didn't stick around. Yeah, because you treated them like the hired help, and you treated them like slave labor, and no kidding, they didn't want to stick around. That's not how you get people engaged. So,
but okay, don't we have to kind of don't we have to kind of go to the next level? Like, don't we need to figure out these young? I think we shouldn't get too far away from your experience with these young kids, because it wasn't so long ago, Bruce. I don't know. Give me the date of the time, maybe 15 years ago, if you were standing on the bridge, rail fanning, and the editor of Railroad Model Craftsman came up and started talking to you, you would have thought you'd met, Rod Stewart or something. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's still a big deal to a lot of modelers, and yet, that's going away. I don't think the magazines will ever go away because I think they play an important part of the hobby, and people will always get a thrill out of seeing their work published, and there will always be people that like to thumb through magazines, and especially, I don't care what anybody says. I don't know how you guys do it. I haven't figured it out. But the quality of the magazines that you guys put out at White River Productions is, for lack of a better word, and Bruce, I'll be interested in your adjective, for lack of a better word, mind-blowing. They are spectacular.
Well, thank you.
I'd say
Like I said, we work really hard. We work really hard each month. It's a group effort, and it's a strenuous effort. I think a lot of people, even my friends, are like, "Oh, you get paid to play with trains all day," and I said, "If only that was the case." It becomes a lot more intense once you're on this side of the rope. I'll tell you that much.
I'll bet it is. I bet it's very intense to do it and get the magazine out every month. Although Tony and I often talk about, he laments that you seem to be gallivanting around the country, and he's stuck at his desk trying to figure out how to make the next widget sound interesting.
Well, and that's the other thing I've had to balance too, is that, it was one thing when I was working on one magazine. So one of my other roles at the company is I do attend several trade shows throughout the year. And, one of the things that I have to balance now is my travel with magazine schedules. And now it's not just one magazine, it's two magazines. By the way, have I mentioned that Railfan and Railroad Model Craftsman both go to press on the same day each month?
Railfan and Railroad?
Railfan and Railroad and Railroad Model Craftsman both go to press on the same day each month.
And you're still an associate editor at Railfan and Railroad?
That's correct.
And they both go to press on the same day?
Same day. I have a question for you guys.
Yeah.
Are you supposed to feel your heartbeat in your fingertips every day, all the time?
Oh yeah. I
That's
have
normal?
medication which helps. I have medication which helps mine, but yeah, it's
Okay.
I noticed you managed to make it an hour and 20 minutes before you mentioned Railfan and Railroad. But now that you have, can we and now that you're an editor, one of the important editors in the industry, is there any way we can revisit the idea that I thought was absolutely revolutionary as far as Railfan and Railroad, whereas January it's Railfan and Railroad, February it's Railroad and Railfan, March it's Railfan and Railroad. Like, has that made any traction at all?
We actually brought it up at our last editors meeting, and we've assigned some top men to the project.
Oh, okay. All right. So
top men.
Top men.
no screwing around, just pulling out all the big dogs.
It's funny. I was thinking about what it's like, once you go from enjoying your hobby, okay, now your hobby is your job. And I still enjoy this. I enjoy this tremendously, that every morning I get to turn on my computer and I'm working with trains all day, on model trains, real trains, whatever it is. That part's still enjoyable. There's still some stress. There's probably some days I'd rather not be sitting in front of a computer all day. But I was thinking about, and this goes back to the travel question too. So it's funny, I'm going to more train shows than I ever went to in my entire life, because growing up out here in the East, growing up out here in New York, there's probably only like maybe 2 or 3 train shows I'd go to a year. In Rochester, we had a show. There was like a show in like Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse. Those cities are an hour away in each direction. But we'd always save all our money, and go to the big show in Springfield, Massachusetts every year, and been going to that show for 20 years now. Actually, 22 years. Wow.
There's a show in Springfield?
And, yeah.
There's a show in Springfield?
Yeah, I don't know if you've heard of it, Lionel. It's the big Amherst Railroad Hobby Show.
Wow.
every January in West Springfield, Massachusetts. It's kind of a big deal. You should check it out.
All right. Well, here's a little bit of info for you. This particular
Yeah.
podcast will be broadcast. Hey, I'm a poet and don't know it. On December 16th, 2019. But on Monday, January the 20th, in the year 2020, we will also be broadcasting an episode with the director of the Amherst Railroad Society, Big E, Springfield Train Show, lots of people, whatever it's called, with John Sacradotti. And guess what podcast is going to have its own badges, a couple of its own badges? It says a Modeler's Life podcast.
Is it going to be what's neat? No, not that one. No.
Yeah.
Oh, so close. However, pick up the lovely parting gifts on your way out, please.
No, but Bruce, in fairness to him, I do believe that one was mentioned in Model Railroader magazine. Boom.
So I've been going to the show forever, and I bring my friends. So when I was at RIT, we had the Model Railroad Club, and so a bunch of us would go out each year, and we'd always, I forget how and why we started doing this, but we'd always go by the Athearn booth, and we'd always bug this guy. He was pretty good natured about it, but we'd always bug poor Mike Hopkin. We would just annoy the crap out of him just because we could. I forget why. Just something that kids do, right? And then I got older and not wiser, just older. And I still bug Mike Hopkin at train shows. Now he's at Scale Trains, and I saw him at the Train Fest show in Milwaukee, and I said, "Hey, Mike, do you remember when I used to come to Springfield and me and my friends would annoy the crap out of you at the booth at Springfield?" He's like, "Yeah, I do." And I said, "Well, got to be careful, Mike, because you never know when today's snot-nosed kid annoying you in the booth is tomorrow's editor of Railroad Model Quiz."
That's true.
And I need to tell you one more story. This is a quick one, but this since my last interview here with the free shrimp, I was at NMRA in Salt Lake City this past summer, and I had the opportunity to see Tony Custer in the Camback booth, and we got to talk for a little bit, and he congratulated me on getting the job. And I told him, in all honesty, I said, it was a very meta experience for me. And I've known Tony, for years, and we talk from time to time, and we help each other out with research and things like that. And it's like, Tony, this is really weird. Me being a little kid growing up reading your columns, in Model Railroader, learning about your railroad, wondering if I'd ever meet you or any of these other people in the magazine. And also, just in general, just growing up reading Tony Custer, later on, working with him professionally. And now it's like, Tony, this is really weird. Now I have your old job. Tony was, past editor of Railroad Model Crafts. And I said, Tony, this is very meta for me, but I'm not saying, I say this, because I take this job very seriously. There's only been 8 or 9 editors of RMC in its history, and the fact that, and, Tony and I talked about that briefly, how it's like, it's a very, you have to take this job very seriously. You always have to be on, and you always have to make yourself available, so that the publication grows, the readership, grows, but also so that, in a way that you're able to, what's the word I'm looking for? You're trying to be that part of the hobby that helps, RMC is just one piece of this hobby that we're trying to push the hobby forward. We are just one part of this, and all of us together, from RMC to Model Railroader to Luke Town and his videos to James Wright to the kids posting their pictures on Facebook, we are all together pushing this hobby forward. So I think we have to remember that, that we're all working together.
For sure. Absolutely. And now, of course, like I've said before, the thing about this podcast is it's something that could never be done before. And I mean, two things. You couldn't, number one, the equipment you would need wasn't portable, and you can't print this extensive of an interview in a magazine. It just doesn't make for good. It's if it was if the magazines were different type, like more of a Time type of thing where it meant to be, uh, or a Rolling Stone, where there's meant to be stories about people, but model railroading magazines don't allow that sort of thing. So it's like this, what we're doing here is something brand new to the hobby that will also help it grow. I
Well, and
mean,
I think what freaks out a lot of people who are in organizations and they don't know how to engage and they don't know how to attract new members. There was a club I knew about, and this club, the layout was 40 years old. The members were twice that old. Everything was steam engines or early diesel era. And, what would they think? Some kid shows up with his, Dash 8 modern diesel and wants to run. And it's like, and all these members are used to their steam engines and F units and Jeeps and 40-foot boxcars. And this kid wants to come in running a couple of Dash 8s and some container cars. It's not that you have to throw out your old way of enjoying the hobby. Just because some kid is really excited about his Dash 8 and his container cars does not mean that your steam engine is garbage. Um, and in fact, you might learn what makes him excited about the Dash 8 and the container cars, and in turn, maybe you can teach him what makes that steam engine so cool. That is really what you're going for. And it's going to mean you're going to have to get out of your comfort zone, which is super, super difficult. It's really easy for me to sit here in the editor's chair and be like, hey, you organizations, you need to change, and just do it. No, it's not that easy. It takes real work. Maybe you need to build a website, maybe you need to build a Facebook page, maybe you need to ask for help doing those things. But, you know, um, it requires real work and real change. So, and not everyone is up for that.
no, that's the
And that's
thing.
that's the truth. Not everyone's up for it.
Not
That's a
everyone,
lot of work.
not everyone's up for it. I mean, I never would have imagined in a million years that the podcast would be this successful. And I mean, it's still, as I refer to it now, my latest way to refer to it is it's not much different than the Burt Reynolds movies from the late '70s and early '80s. I say that this podcast is very similar to the movie Hooper with Burt Reynolds and Cannonball Run 2, where basically they deteriorated to his home movies. It was just his pals, and they would give themselves some lines, and they would make up some lame
I
story. And
I was hoping that you were going to say this podcast was like Smokey and the Bandit, so we can go get some Coors.
well, yeah, well that too. There's always beer. There's always there, there could possibly be a beer or five here, but the point of it is, it's us sitting around having discussions that we would have anyways. But you've got to take the effort to record them all. I mean, the hobby hasn't changed that much. Okay, now it's on the internet, but the same thing still applies to the hobby. You still have to have some initiative to create whatever it is you want to do, whether it is having a website or whether it is building a layout, and you still have to have that initiative. The same basic principle still applies to every aspect of model railroading. You still gotta kind of roll up your sleeves and get in there to get the most out of it. So,
Well, it's
I
like
agree.
it's
Yeah.
like going to the health club. If you don't go to the health club and just spend $300 a year in a membership and wonder why you're not losing weight, same thing. Get involved in your local club and go out and participate and have fun.
exactly. Do the Bruce's favorite thing. Do the AP program. We got a question. We got a couple of important questions for you, Otto.
Yes, sir.
Number one. Do you consider Detroit to be in the East or the Midwest?
Detroit.
Yeah.
Detroit is part of the Midwest.
Okay. Well then, okay. Here's where I struggle. What do you consider Atlanta to be? Part of the East or the Midwest?
Well, Atlanta would be in the east.
Okay, well, Atlanta.
Well, if
But
yeah,
hang on.
yeah, okay, all right.
Atlanta is farther west than Detroit.
Hmm.
So this is where I'm struggling, and in no way can I imagine that Motown was ever part of the Midwest.
Well, why
Well, it's
not?
part of
When you
this.
look at the history of music, a lot of it came out of the Midwest.
Well, exactly, jazz and Chicago and things like that.
Yes.
Okay, and our second question. Hang on.
And back to Atlanta. Atlanta's in the heart of the South.
Okay.
Yeah. Don't tell someone from Atlanta that they're from the east. They will tell you that they're from the south. There is no east.
There is no East. Yeah.
They are from the south.
All right. How about this one then? You're holding your phone up to take a picture. You're at your favorite rail fanning spot. You're at your favorite
Right.
rail fanning spot, and you're gonna
Yep.
go take a picture. Now, of course, the picture. If you want to get the best quality picture, you're gonna use your camera, which is opposite side of where all your apps and your screen is. So
Right.
is the camera on the front of the phone or the back of the phone?
Is the camera on the front of the phone or the back of the phone? The front-facing camera is one on your screen, so the one that you're taking the picture with is the back camera.
Okay.
Front-facing camera is what you take a selfie with.
Right. Exactly. Which
Okay.
I rarely do, but if I was, I would use the front-facing camera. Absolutely. Unless,
Yeah.
of course, I
You've
hand.
never known to take a selfie, yes.
Nah. Well, you know what? I'm
Well, that's why he's asking the question. He's not familiar with technology. He wants to take a
exactly.
selfie.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking of taking a selfie tomorrow, and I'm trying to figure out.
I'm not sure. No, I don't know how to do it.
All right, Otto. Because this is the state of the hobby, you got one chance. Give us what you think. One thing that you're looking forward to in the hobby in the future, in the next year.
Oh man, it's really hard to say.
I know it is, but you can go ahead and do it. Nobody's listening, so don't worry about it.
I'm gonna say I'm really looking forward to Z-scale hummingbirds.
No, you got to come up with
D-
no. You got to
DCC Z-scale hummingbirds.
Oh, there you go.
no. You got to do better than that. Something tangible. What do you think is the direction of the hobby? Something that you know, because you have your finger on the pulse of manufacturers, and you go to a lot of shows, and everybody wants to talk to you because they want to get free advertising. They want you to do a story about their product or their club or whatever. What is it? The one thing that you're kind of excited about in the hobby over the next short period, 12 months or so?
Like a specific product that I'm excited about, or a specific concept?
Concept, product, anything about the hobby.
Me personally, this is just my personal opinion. Something I've been watching for a few years develop is Bowser has a project to produce every phase and model of the RS3, and they're very
Ooh.
close to having some of their first models come out in 2020. So I'm excited. I'm hoping by NMRA 2020 in St. Louis, I'll be looking at some pre-production samples.
Nice.
All right. See, that's and the hobby, and there'll probably be more of that as we go along.
Yes. Well, and so we're talking about how manufacturing can do specific road names now, and especially if you look at a locomotive like the Alco RS3, the main components are the short hood, the cab, the long hood, and different railroads had different configurations for all those pieces. And one of the models that Bowser is producing, very specific, is the high hood RS3, nicknamed the Hammerhead by rail fans. Only two railroads had the high hood RS3, Western Maryland and the Pennsylvania Railroad. And the Pennsylvania Railroad traded their high hood RS3 to the Lehigh Valley, which they controlled in 1970. And that high hood RS3, Lehigh Valley 211, is now at our museum in Rochester operating. And we helped Bowser. They called us up and they said, "Hey, we want to measure your RS3," and we said, "Absolutely, happy to have you come out." So they will be releasing a model of Lehigh Valley 211, and I'm super excited for when that happens, because not only did we make that happen, but just that we were able to help, and then now there's going to be another unique model on the market.
Yeah. Well, and how did you guys very quickly? How did you guys end up with the Hammerhead RS3 from Lehigh Valley 211?
One of our members went to Juniata shops in Pennsylvania because they heard that there was a Lehigh Valley Jeep that might be available, but it had been scrapped. And instead, they found the 211 on the deadline, and they were able to save that instead. And a bunch of our members pooled their resources, were able to purchase it and bring it to Rochester, and we were able to actually lease it to a local short line for a couple of years, which paid off the purchase price of the locomotive. And those investors who helped purchase the locomotive and bring it to the museum, a couple of those guys went on to found a short line railroad called Genesee Valley Transportation. So their first foray into the railroad world was because they helped bring a rare diesel to our museum.
Wow, that's very cool.
Wow. Wow is right.
All right. Well, what do you think, Bruce? That was kind of interesting, wasn't it?
That was fascinating, as we expected.
Yeah, exactly. That whole "what's neat this week" thing kind of threw me.
Yeah,
Sorry.
well,
That's okay. You don't have to be sorry. We love Kenny. We refer to Ken Patterson as simply the dude. We think he should be referred to as the dude in model railroading.
And as we all know, the dude abides.
The dude abides. Exactly.
exactly.
Yeah. A great time was had by all. Bruce, could you give out our email address?
Yes, our email address, because after you've listened to Otto expound upon the state of the hobby, I'm sure you'll have comments and questions. You can contact us at modeler'slife, modelers with one L, modeler'slife@gmail.com.
And we have a website. If you go to modeler'slife.com, you'll find all kinds of stuff there. There's a list of our most recent episodes, and there's a link to our Patreon page. So if you go there, if once a week isn't enough, if you want to listen to the podcast twice a week, Monday and Tuesday, you can go to Patreon, and just for $5 a month, you can have twice as many podcasts to keep you happy in your podcasting work, and to have our as our pal and regular contributor Kaylee Zhang refers to it. She says the Tuesday shows are more of our antics. Those are kind of our antics. I don't know if they're antics. I think they're just us goofing around.
Tomfoolery?
Yeah, tomfoolery. We answer viewer mail. We look at viewer posts. We look at our Facebook page at Chris Atkins Start, fans of the Modeler's Life podcast. There's a ton of posts there. There's like 350 members. And we have half-hour interviews. We have all kinds of stuff. There is way too much stuff. There are way too many people and way too much stuff to talk about. And we have almost 200. We have 165 or 70 patrons. And as soon as we hit 1,000, we're going to hire a staff. I'm going to hire you away, Otto. I'll hire you away from White River Productions.
Sounds great.
There you go. Do you remember? I know you listened to all the podcasts and some of them twice.
Yes.
Do you remember what it is that happens at the end of an episode, which is what this will be? It will be broadcast on December the 16th, just before Christmas. Once again, this year, I beg you not to spend too much on me. I know it was quite a bit last year, and you need to kind of calm yourself down.
Sorry. Well, I imagine you're going to check my pockets for the free shrimp, right?
Oh, absolutely. I could have sworn the green ones were mint flavored. So at the appropriate moment, we need you to say happy rails to you.
Can do.
All right. Well, Otto, as we close the barn doors on another episode of A Modeler's Life, and the sun slowly sets over the back 40, I guess there's nothing else left to do except for you to say
happy rails to you.
Hello and Busted Knuckle, guests of a Modeler's Life podcast stay at the Casa del Sol Motor Court and Inn, where late night dancing at the Rumba Room is a magical event to be experienced.
It's another Lincoln Homer.